Hey everybody, in today's episode we're going to take a close look at this 1970s Fender Stratocaster and see what kind of tones we can get out of it. Let's check it out. All right, welcome back, and thank you all so much for being here. This is the subject of today's video, and this is a 1979 25th anniversary Fender Stratocaster, and this is a unique guitar with some interesting features that we will get to in just a bit, but I have to apologize for the lengthy intro video there. I think I was inspired by this big headstock and had to play some Jimi Hendrix riffs, but I will say, listening back to that recording, I thought this guitar sounded really good, and it really impressed me. But I was playing through a 1964 Fender Super Reverb with a 60s Vox wah, amongst other things, and you know, probably playing any guitar through that rig is going to sound pretty good. But I think a blind test with this guitar versus my 59, most people may not be able to tell the difference. Now, there are some playability issues and, you know, just quality of components that I don't necessarily like, and we'll get into that in just a bit. But today, I really want to talk about 70s Fender guitars and my experience with them, some of the issues that I have, and you know, if you guys have a 70s Fender, or maybe you played one back in the day, please drop a comment and let us know what your experience is, and we can have a discussion there. But first, before we get into all of that today, I want to go ahead and play for you guys just the straight in, clean tone, no pedals, no reverb of the neck pickup and the fourth position of this guitar, which is the neck and middle combined, because I think that's really where it shines, and something about these guitars for me has that kind of Hendrixy rhythm tone, and maybe that's in my head, but I think it's really good at that. So I want to give you guys the clean tone real quick, and then we'll get into some of the issues I have with 70s guitars. So hopefully I was able to capture the sound of this guitar through the recording. I think it sounds really good, honestly, despite some playability issues. And one thing you'll run into with 70s guitars that I've found, both Tellies and Stratocasters, is that the pickups can be kind of microphonic, and they will squeal at high volume and high gain. And they went to a lacquer potting later on. In the 50s and 60s, the pickups were wax potted. And over, 40 or 50 years, the lacquer potting just doesn't hold up, it seems, and you'll get some squealing and microphonics with these pickups. But you can actually wax pot pickups yourself. It's not that complicated, and that would solve your issue. Now, this guitar is original, straight out of the box, basically from '79. And it's got the original frets, which they're vintage style frets. But this one has not been played that much, so it is still very playable, but on a vintage guitar of any kind, really, you can pretty much expect you're going to need to do a fret job and replace the nut as well. Now, one unique feature about this guitar, if you look on the back here, this has a 4-bolt neck plate, which that's a big complaint among people on 70s guitars is when they went to that 3-bolt design around 71 or 72. And, you know, I've played them personally. I don't like them aesthetically, and it's just not my thing. I mean, they sound fine, but I would rather have a 4-bolt neck plate. So it's kind of interesting that Fender went back to this for the Anniversary model. I guess they were kind of trying to go back to some of the original specs of the 1954 Stratocaster, but also on this guitar, you'll see that there is no bullet truss rod like the original guitars, and the truss rod adjustment is down here. So that's another nice feature that's different amongst the standard 70s Strats, and you'll see the big Fender logo there, which is just classic. Now on the back, you'll see the tuners are different for this model. I can't remember what brand these are. I'll have to put it in the video, but they are Fender labeled tuners, and they're pretty cool looking. I have not seen those on any other guitars, so that's a neat feature about the Anniversary model. So ultimately, I have one complaint about this guitar that is a deal breaker. Everything else I'm cool with. I kind of like it. It's got its own character going on. But this guitar weighs 9 pounds, 14 ounces. And that's just too heavy for me, you know? I mean, the Les Paul guys out there will laugh at me for that, but I just don't like 10-pound guitars if I'm going to be playing it out live. You know, if I'm just leaving it here and I pick it up every once in a while, that's one thing. But to have this around your neck for hours at a time, for me, it starts to get heavy. But if that doesn't bother you, then, you know, you can look at a lot more guitars than I can. And, you know, it's interesting. I've heard some people say that, you know, people think heavy guitars have better sustain or better tone, and that was even a marketing ploy back in the day. But from what I understand, from what I've researched, the light tone woods were kind of running out by the mid 60s. And, you know, Fender even started experimenting with some ideas of weight reduction. They had the Smuggler Telly in the mid to late 60s where they would route out everything underneath the pickguard to try to save weight, but ultimately they didn't do it if it wasn't economically feasible, or it just didn't work that well. So they didn't do that. But Fender also was coming out with a semi-hollow Telecaster, certainly a weight reduction move, but it was also, you know, competing with some of Gibson's guitars. So it's hard to say exactly, but into the 70s, both Fenders and Gibsons got extremely heavy. You'll have 10 pound, 11, 12 pound, you know, and up. So that's one thing to think about if you're buying a 70s guitar. You might want to ask what the weight is if that matters to you. Now, another point I wanted to touch on in this video was I once had a comment that said, you know, Jimi Hendrix used CBS big headstock Stratocasters and they never bothered him. You know, he was the greatest guitarist of all time, arguably, and he used these guitars that, you know, people claim are not any good. And I don't think really it's a fair comparison, honestly, because at the end there, he was using 68, 9, 70 Strats. And I don't think that's a fair comparison to the later 3-bolt guitars that were, you know, heavy and had the later pop metal bridges and stuff like that. But also, you know, Jimi Hendrix destroyed a lot of guitars. He went through a lot of guitars, and there are pictures of him with modified guitars, and Seymour Duncan modified his guitars. So I just think there is some truth to it, but ultimately things changed a lot into the 70s with these Fenders. So like I said, please drop a comment if you've had a 70s Fender or you currently do. What is your experience with them? If you like them, hate them. If you agree or disagree with me, that's fine. We can still remain friends and disagree. I'm not saying this is a bad guitar by any means. In fact, it absolutely impressed me, and hopefully that translated through the video. You guys can hear it. I think it really sounded good at the intro there. And, you know, the thing of it is, it just depends on what your needs are. So if you're a guy who, you know, plays out every weekend with a band and, you know, does studio stuff, you know, probably you want a a nicer reissue guitar that's going to be more reliable and has the right frets and, you know, plays better. But, you know, if you're someone who's looking for that kind of vintage appeal at, you know, the cheapest possible price you could get, which is really the price of a reissue, then I think this guitar gets you there. If you want kind of that Hendrix feel, then there's nothing better than this, really. And if you go online right now and look up the 25th anniversary guitars, they are anywhere between $1,500 to maybe $2,000, $2,500 at the top of it, if they're clean and, you know, original. But you know, right now they're as low as like $1,700, $1,800. There's a few there, so I think they just are not as desirable. They're not as popular. But it's interesting because they don't have the bullet truss rod and they are a 4-bolt. So I don't think they're a bad option for like I said, if it just depends on what you are looking for. This guitar could certainly work for you, and you could certainly make it sound very good. All right, guys, that's today's episode. Thank you for watching me dive into this 79 Strat. I'm gonna play it out for you, give you some more examples of the tone, and please leave a comment on your own experiences, or if you wanna help out the channel and comment for the algorithm, as they say, that would be surely appreciated. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Keep playing. All right, peace.
La 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 la.